Good morning, afternoon, evening, everyone, depending on what time of the day in the world it is where you are with us today. Welcome to the Connect with Control-M webinar. My name is James Pendergrast, and today we'll be taking a look at the Filewatcher utility and talking about the different things you can do with it. Let's start by taking a look at today's agenda. We'll start with an overview of the Filewatcher utility, what it is and what it does. We'll go into a demo. We'll show some jobs running and show how it reacts. And then we'll go to tips and tricks, and we'll end up with the Q&A session. On the right-hand side of your screen, you'll see a box for Q&A. If you could type any of your questions in there as the webinar goes along, and we'll answer them at the end of the session. Filewatcher overview. What is Filewatcher? Filewatcher monitors the creation or deletion of a file. And if the file is created, it can monitor when the file ceases to grow or stabilizes in size. Filewatcher tool is very useful if Control-M is not able to monitor a process directly, and we need a trigger to determine when a remote process is completed. So if you have a process, for the demo later, I'm using an example of a payroll process where Control-M doesn't have access to the machine. But when the process is done, it can write a file in a file system. We can use that file to trigger additional jobs to run. Filewatcher is an agent utility that runs on the Control-M agent. The Control-M module for AFT also contains a Filewatcher, which is similar in what it does and how it acts. But it watches a file on a remote file system using the FTP or SSH protocol. The Filewatcher that we're discussing today is just the Filewatcher that runs on the local agent, and it monitors local files or files that are accessible through a file share. There are several different ways to run the Filewatcher. You can run it with a form in a job, you can run it with a command line in a job, and you can run it with an input file. Let's start by looking at the form and the command line. When you create a job and choose the Filewatcher type, you'll get a form in there that fills out for filling out all the parameters. The first thing that's in there is the path, and you must use a fully qualified path with a fully qualified file name. You can use wildcards in here. Note that wildcards may behave differently on different operating systems. They may behave differently between Windows and Unix. So you can use wildcards, but you must know the operating system of the agent that's running the wildcard. One other thing to note when using wildcards, if you wildcard the end of the file name, it matches the first file name that meets the criteria. So you may get multiple files coming back that match if you use a wildcard, and it will use the first file that comes back. The mode is either create or delete. Obviously, if you're looking for the file creation, you choose create. If you're looking for delete, choose delete. One note with delete is for the file to be noted as deleted, it has to exist first. Next box is the owner. This is the owner of the job that runs the Filewatcher. Next box is minimum detected size. Most agents and operating systems do support polling for the file size. In this instance, we've chosen 4 bytes just to make sure we don't get a 0-byte file. And the next 3 parameters control 2 loops that run for file detection. Interval between file searches, and my example is set for 5 seconds. This is how often the Filewatcher loops in the first loop to determine if it found the file. The next 2 boxes, interval between file size iteration, comparison iterations and number of iterations, controls the secondary loop. It's how many iterations and waiting how long between the two to determine if the file that we found meets the minimum detected size. So the first loop just finds the file. The second loop make sure the file fits any of the other criteria that we have, like minimum detected size. These loops are specific only to the Filewatch utility. This does not control the job. So if the job is cyclic, If the job recycles, these parameters start over again from scratch. And in this example, we've got them set pretty low. The loops are pretty tight. And the reason why is, we've got a demo system. We need to get it going pretty quickly. If your file may appear, over a 3 or 4 hour span, then, you adjust these parameters accordingly. Monitor file size and age when wildcard is used, the next parameter. By default, it's set to no. If you're checking for the file size and you're using a wildcard, you need to set this parameter to yes. Time limit for the process. You can set a maximum time in minutes that the Filewatcher will watch. So if you only need to watch for 2 hours once it starts, then you can put 120 minutes in there. By default, it's 0. It runs until it finds. Start time for detecting files is now by default, but you could set it to start at a future month, day, year, hour, minute if you needed it to work that way. There's also an absolute stop time. If you needed it to stop looking at a certain time, 10 o'clock at night or whatever, you could put 2200 in there. The next two are rarely used as far as I know, minimal file age and maximal file age. It deals with the timestamps on the file itself. So on the bottom there, we have the same Filewatcher command, same Filewatcher parameters in a command. And it just called the CTM-FW. It has the file name, has all the parameters listed. One thing to note is that all the parameters have defaults, and if you don't need to put them in, you don't have to. But if you put the 4th parameter in, then you have to put parameters 1 through 3 in. All right, moving on to using an input file. When we install on Windows, we install a Windows service called Filewatcher. You've probably all seen that before and probably wondered what exactly it is. All it is a Windows service that runs a Filewatcher input file. We put a default one out there that doesn't do anything. But Windows and Unix and AS400, I know AS400 does it, but the syntax is a little different. Same thing, you can run CTM Filewatcher-input with a input file. A couple things to note on that. Number one, you have to use the full path name and full file name of that input file. I have a demo one here. We'll discuss the details of it later, but we're watching for 2 different files. So let's go into our demo environment. We're going to look at a simple Filewatcher create and delete. We'll look at the Filewatcher form, look at the Filewatcher command, show some jobs triggering, and show you some useful output. Let me get the Control-M up here. Now we're going to use Control-M version 8 for our demo today. It's the latest version that's available. So I've created 3 different columns of jobs. The first one is a job I called Gather Payroll. For the demo, all this does is create a file in the local file system. And these are my file watchers. Watch for creation, watches for the file to be created. It's just simulating a remote system that runs and drops the file out there at some point in time. So watch for creation, watches for that. And then it starts a process called process payroll. And then when process payroll is done, it deletes that payroll file. And then I have 3 file watchers watching for when that ends. Detect file deletion, Filewatcher command for deletion, and I have an additional job that we'll talk about later that uses OS Compstat 7. So let's look at watch for creation. We'll open him up. Now, since we created as a Filewatcher job, it has a Filewatcher form that's available here. And this is the form with the values that we were looking at earlier, except for that one, which is incorrect. Let me fix that rather quickly. Save it. All right. And then process payroll just deletes that file. And then detect file deletion has a Filewatcher form also. The only difference is it's delete. Minimum detected size is 0. And it has a little bit longer looping on it. It has 10-second interval and then 3 loops of 10 seconds checking that the file's actually deleted. The reason this one's a little longer is I have to wait for the file to be created in the other process and wait for it to be deleted. So it's a little bit longer of a loop that's needed here. The Filewatcher command does not have the Filewatcher form, but it does have the command just listed out as a command in the command window. So let's look at the OS CompStat 7 job. So when a Filewatcher job runs, it can return one of 3 return codes just from the Filewatcher, 0, 1, or 7. So if it returns 0, then it was successful. It found the file, did what it was asked to do. If it returns 1, then it failed. We have added a third value in there, OS CompStat 7. 7 means that the file was never detected. It's not that it was there and didn't get large enough or whatever, but that the file was never detected. It adds a layer of granularity. It may matter for the job that you're running whether the file ever appeared or whether it just didn't get large enough in the specified time. So the CompStat 7 gives you the ability to detect that. So in this job, I've got when OS completion status, or OS ComStat, which is the return code, equals 7, we'll get a notify alerts and we'll attempt to remove a condition. So when it comes back as 7, you can key off of that, start other jobs that you need to, possibly rerun, send an alert out, whatever it may be. You may need to know that the job never appeared. It gives you a good bit of granularity. So let's check these in. Let's order these jobs up. And then move to our monitoring domain. And here's our gather payroll job that's running. It hasn't completed yet. Let's look at the payroll directory. Here's our Filewatcher job running. It has not started the payroll job because it hasn't detected the file yet. The file just came into our directory. This should complete momentarily. Start off the payroll process job. The detect file deletion job is running. And we're just waiting for it to complete. All right. Check something real quick. It is still set to 500 bytes. All right. The joys of doing a live demo is that file is not 500 bytes in size. So it's not going to complete. So let me kill it. And then we'll set it to OK. So now the process payroll job is running. This file's still running to detect. Let me go back to my planning domain real quick and order these to additional jobs. And back to our monitoring domain. So while we were gone, the process payroll job deleted the file. Detect file deletion ran correctly. This job will now not complete successfully, but because it didn't see the creation. So while we're waiting on this one to fail, let's look at the first Filewatcher job that ran. We'll look at the output. So this job, I actually had to force it OK because I had a typo. I had watching for a 500 byte file, and the file's only 10 bytes in size now. But what we can see is it ran the Filewatcher command, and in the output it puts the command that it ran. So in this case, we were able to see that it ran with a 500 byte file. Let me show you the file deletion, which will give us a little bit more granularity. When you run Filewatcher jobs, the Filewatcher runs and does those loops, and it evaluates the file as it does the loops. So in the output that you get, when it runs successfully, and you don't have to kill it like I did earlier, here's the command, and then you can see that at 9:14:36 the file didn't exist. Went back through the loop again, 9:15:06, the file exists, waits for it to be deleted, and at 9:16:56 it noticed that the file had been deleted, at which point it completed the job. So when if you have problems or issues with it, come look at the sysout and see what command it ran and see what files it was looking for in the location of that file. Very handy to have that go through. And let's look at our OS compstat job. Let's look at the output. So this one was looking for a file that didn't exist. We were looking for file creation. So we didn't get a 0 or 1 return code. We got a 7 return code because the file was never created. So the text is a little bit different in this one. You'll notice where the message that comes back is the file was not created within the time limit. Just showing a little bit extra granularity there. And we had some alerts set up for that. If we go look at our alert screen, we can see our alerts payroll completed. We can see our failed to delete condition from our payroll 2 job. All right. One more thing I want to show you is doing the rule file from the command line. This is just pre-typed in CTM Filewatcher-input, and I've got the rule file that I said we would discuss later. Let's go ahead and start that one off. Pull it up, and here's the rule file. Now when you build a rule file, 2 big things to note. Number one, everything in the first part of this, the first paragraph, the first block, this is global to all the file watchers that come below in this file. Second big thing to note is we're watching for 2 files here. Everything between on file watch and end on, everything in this block is 1 file. So we're actually looking for 2 different files. We're looking for payroll text and payroll exceptions. And then in between for each block, when you find it, you do the then clause or the then parameter, which would be these. If it doesn't find it, you do the else, which is the next 2 commands. So in our example here, we're not going to find the file, so we're going to set a condition and do a shout. And for the second one, we're just simply going to do a shout. So now that it's actually running back here, it's gone through its time loops. You can see it printing on the screen here. It prints out the command, and then it prints out the header block that we had with the parameters, and then it prints out when each one of the file watchers completes that's in the on file watch. It prints them out and prints what it was doing. File was not created within the time, executing ctmcontb, which is the adding the parameter that we ask it to do. It lists the parameter name. Failed to delete the condition because it doesn't exist. So it tells you what it's doing, reports on what it was doing. The only issue with running from the command line like this is you can't tell when it's running and what it's doing, as opposed to a job where you can look at the sysout. If you're running it from the command line outside of Control-M, you don't get the sysout. You can't tell what the job progress is. However, you are able to watch multiple jobs in one file watcher. All right, so let's go back to our slides. So some tips and tricks that we see a lot. Two big ones. The first two, permissions on the file being watched. Make sure that the user that's noted in the file watcher has permissions to get to that file and to get the details back for that file. If you don't have permissions to read the file, you can't get the file size back, and you can't always detect that the file even exists because you're getting an error code back. Second issue that we see a lot is UNC or / remote file system mounts. If the mount isn't there, then you can't obviously watch for the file. So our suggestion is to do a pre-job, a job before your file watcher, just to validate that the mount's there. Do a dir on it, something simple, dir, list, whatever, just to make sure that that mount's there. Because if the mount's not there, your file watcher job's is going to fail. And then if you check it in a pre-job, and you do a dir or an ls and it fails, then you can fork off down a different path to go make sure that that mount's there. If you have issues, the easiest thing to do is just pull up the output. We used to call it sysout, and I keep wanting to call it sysout, but it's now called output. Look in the output, and you can see the decisions that FileWatcher made as it looked at the file, what file it used and how long, and you can actually tell the timing of it and what it found. And if that doesn't give you enough information, you can always put the agent in debug. Depending on the operating system, you can put the agent utilities in debug or just put the full agent in debug. When you put the utilities or the agent in debug, you'll find CTM-FW files in the proclog directory, and the CTM-FW files contain all the information for the file watcher. And the last thing, I just want to reiterate one more time, the return codes of 0, which is success, 1 is fail, and number 7 is did not find the file in the time requested. Very powerful feature with the return code 7. So that concludes the demo part of the webinar. Thank you for attending. At the end, you'll get a survey. Please let us know how we did. Let us know the other questions on the survey. Let us know future topics that you'd like to see. We do listen and review those and find out what most people are asking for and what would be beneficial for us to do. I'd like to invite you to attend next month, June's Workload Change Manager, done by Octavio. Please follow us on Control-M, Twitter, and Facebook. Also BMC Communities, it's listed there. Version 8, FixPack, I believe it's 2, introduced news feed that has a lot of information there. And shortly we'll be moving over to the Q&A session. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask them. We'll do our best to get you an answer. As we go to the questions, I'm going to leave the screen up showing the recent Connect with Control-M webinars. 2 links below. You can find them on demand, and you can find them on YouTube.